Picture this. A long line of tourists shuffles into the Great Pyramid, cameras ready, heads bowed to squeeze through the low entrance. Flashlights sweep over stone blocks. The air grows heavy, and everyone whispers because it feels like walking into a grave. But what if they are not entering a tomb at all? What if they are walking through a classroom, not a grave? For thousands of years, we have been told a simple story. The pyramids were royal tombs, monuments to ego, to power, to pharaohs who wanted to be remembered forever. Stone mountains built to hold a dead body and its treasures. That is the textbook explanation most of us grew up with. But old legends tell a different story. Did you know many of the most famous pyramids do not match the tomb idea at all? In the Great Pyramid, no mummy has ever been found. The granite sarcophagus in the king's chamber is empty. There are no golden coffins, no painted scenes of daily life, no piles of burial goods like in the tomb of Tutankhamun. Just bare stone, tight passages, and a strange echoing silence. If this is a tomb, where is the death? Welcome back to the channel. Here, we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands, to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. Archaeologists call them royal graves. Yet again and again, we find missing mummies, robbed, or never placed. Some pyramids show signs of being sealed before anybody went inside. Others, like the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid, also lack clear burial equipment. Instead of funerary luxury, we see geometry, alignment, and precise stonework. It feels less like a cemetery and more like a device. Imagine every pyramid in Egypt as a stone textbook from an invisible university of the soul, a curriculum carved in limestone and granite, descending passages like first lessons in darkness and fear, narrow shafts pointing towards stars as chapters on the afterlife, inner chambers arranged not for comfort, but for pressure, sound, and stillness. What kind of knowledge needs a building like this to be learned? According to the stories, the ancient Egyptians sometimes called the pyramid a machine for making gods. That is a shocking phrase. If this is a machine, who was meant to climb inside? Only pharaohs and high priests, or chosen initiates from hidden schools? And most importantly, what did graduation mean in a place where the final exam might be a journey through the underworld itself? Most of us imagine mystery schools as secret circles meeting beneath temples, in underground chambers far from public eyes. But what if the first great schools were hiding in plain sight? What if the lessons in death and rebirth began not under the pyramids, but inside them, in these tight stone corridors where breath turns to mist and every sound vibrates through the body? But what really happened in these silent passages? Were these pyramids training grounds for consciousness, not just monuments to the dead? We'll find out together as we step past the tourist lines and read the stone textbooks of Egypt for ourselves. The central riddle. If not tombs, then what were they training for? If these corridors were classrooms, then what was the lesson? If these colossal pyramids were not just tombs, then what were the pharaohs and priests really training for? What kind of knowledge demands a building the size of a mountain, aligned to the stars, and locked behind granite plugs? Imagine the pyramids as a syllabus written in stone. Every passage, every angle, every hidden chamber is a chapter. Did you know that many of these so-called tombs never held a body at all? No mummy, no burial goods, just echoing chambers and shafts aimed at specific stars. If this was only about burying a king, why carve narrow tunnels that force a person to crawl downward into darkness, only to rise again toward a starlit opening? Why design an experience that feels like dying and then being reborn? For thousands of years, most visitors have seen separate monuments. Djoser's strange step pyramid at Saqqara, Sneferu's bent pyramid with its broken angle, the red pyramid glowing in the desert, and finally the polished giants of Giza. But old legends tell a different story. They hint that every pyramid belongs to one vast, evolving teaching program, like grades in a hidden school. Early pyramids experiment with levels and courtyards. Later ones perfect the inner chambers, and by the time we reach Khufu's Great Pyramid, it is as if the curriculum has reached its final exam. According to the stories, Egypt once held mystery schools, where initiates learned to walk the path of the afterlife while still alive. Imagine these schools not in simple classrooms, but inside stone labyrinths and star-aligned corridors. The Nile Valley becomes a campus. Pyramids, temples, and underground galleries are different departments of the same invisible university of the soul. The subject? Mastering the journey through the duat, understanding the gates of the underworld, and training consciousness to survive the shock of death. This episode is our entry test into that forbidden syllabus. We are not just asking whether the pyramids were tombs or not. We are asking, were they machines for making Ak beings, the luminous, perfected forms described in the pyramid texts? Why do the earliest inscriptions in Unis's pyramid obsess over transformation, not burial? Why are so many passages aligned with Orion and Sirius, the very stars the Egyptians associated with the duat and the afterlife boats of the gods? Most importantly, this is not a random tour. It is part of a larger journey into the mystery schools of Egypt, and you are invited to become a modern initiate. Together, we will move from mainstream archaeology to the oldest sacred texts, from sacred geometry and precise north alignments to the mythic maps of the duat. By the end, the promise is simple. We'll find out together how to walk into any pyramid, not as a tourist, but as someone who can finally read its hidden meaning. But to decode that meaning, we first have to understand what the Egyptians believed happened at the moment of death, and why they built entire worlds of stone to rehearse it. From royal tombs to transformation engines, reframing the pyramids, and why they built entire worlds of stone to rehearse it. To see that, we have to step back and look at the story we were all taught. Did you know there is a neat official timeline for the pyramids, laid out like a straight road? It begins in the Old Kingdom with Pharaoh Djoser and his step pyramid at Saqqara, that strange stone staircase rising from the desert like a frozen ziggurat. Then comes Sneferu, the experimenter king, building the bent pyramid, the red pyramid, testing angles and techniques. After him, the Giza plateau explodes into greatness with Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. Then, as centuries pass, the pyramids grow smaller, rougher, almost tired. The golden age fades. In this conventional story, the meaning is simple. Pyramids are tombs, monumental graves for pharaohs who wanted to be remembered forever. Massive stone mountains used to broadcast power, control labor, and freeze a king's name in time. The inner chambers, just burial rooms. The passages, corridors for funerary rituals and offerings. In this view, the bigger the pyramid, the stronger the state, and the more desperate the attempt to secure the king's afterlife. But what really happened inside those stone mountains? Why do some of the most famous pyramids show no clear signs of actual burials? And why are the earliest pyramid texts in Unis's tomb obsessed not with coffins, but with transformation into an Akh, a luminous, perfected being? Here, an older, quieter narrative begins to whisper through the cracks. Old legends tell a different story. Egyptian priests and later Greek writers like Herodotus and Plutarch hint that Egypt was a land of initiation, a place where temples and monuments functioned as mystery schools. According to the stories, pharaohs and chosen initiates did not just honor the dead, they trained to move through the hidden gates of the afterlife while still alive. In that light, a pyramid stops being only a tomb and becomes an initiatory temple. Imagine entering its low, sloping passage, leaving the bright desert behind. The air cools, the light vanishes. You descend into a narrow throat of stone, swallowed by darkness. This is symbolic death. Deep inside, chambers open like inner worlds. The so-called Queen's Chamber, the King's Chamber, spaces where rituals of stillness, sound, and breath could guide consciousness out of the body and toward the stars. For thousands of years, these structures have stood like fixed points in a spiritual landscape, mountains of stone rising from the Nile's floodplain, their sides aligned to true north, their angles echoing sacred geometry, their shafts pointing to Orion and the circumpolar stars. They bridge earth, sky, and the invisible realms, turning the desert into a map of the duat. If each pyramid is a different chapter in this hidden curriculum, what kind of knowledge was encoded in their changing designs? And most importantly, how were the inner journeys staged, step by step, inside those chambers of silence? In the next section, we'll walk that path from death to transformation, guided by the very texts carved into the stone. Who was allowed inside? The closed doors of Egypt's invisible university, guided by the very texts carved into the stone. But before we walk that inner path, there is a harder question. Who was actually allowed to take it? And what did it cost to cross that invisible line between the ordinary world and Egypt's hidden schools of the soul? For thousands of years, most Egyptians lived in a world of sunlight and repetition. Dawn over the Nile, fields of barley and emmer wheat, mud brick houses clustered around wells, donkeys in the lanes, voices bargaining in crowded markets, incense curling from simple village shrines where families prayed for rain, health, and safe births. Their rituals were public, reassuring, woven into the rhythm of planting and harvest. But on the horizon, something else rose. massive, silent, and closed. Pyramid complexes, ringed with walls, guarded gates, and inner courts where ordinary feet never walked. Did you know many of these inner chambers were sealed from the moment the final stone slid into place? To most people, they were not temples to visit. They were forbidden zones, machines of mystery reserved for a narrow elite. According to the stories, those gates opened only for a very small circle. The pharaoh, of course, at the center of it all, seen as the living axis between earth and sky. High priests of Ra and Osiris, trained for decades in sacred texts and precise rituals. Select scribes who could read the oldest spells, keeping watch over every word. And, some believe, rare initiates chosen not by birth alone, but by discipline, courage and readiness to face controlled encounters with the underworld while still alive. This was not education as we know it. No chalkboards, no rows of students taking notes. Inside the pyramid, the lessons were darkness, silence, and stone. Narrow passages forced the body to bow. Chambers were tuned to strange acoustic resonance, where a single chant could vibrate through bone and blood. Ordeals were staged to strip away ordinary certainty. Lying in a stone sarcophagus, fasting in total blackness, listening to the echo of one's own heartbeat as if it were a drum from the duat itself. Old legends tell a different story about what these trials were for. They were not just rehearsals for personal survival after death. The goal was to become an Ak, a luminous, effective spirit capable of moving freely through the 12 gates of the duat, speaking the right names, influencing both the world of the living and the hidden realms beyond the stars. Now imagine this is you. Night has fallen. Torches flicker against smooth limestone as priests lead you toward a low, descending passage. The air cools. Sand crunches under your feet. Behind you, at the entrance, men brace a polished block of stone. You know that once it grinds into place, there will be no easy way back. Your breath slows. The light ahead narrows. In that moment, you are no longer a farmer or scribe. You are a candidate for Egypt's invisible university. But what really happened after that stone sealed the way? What did the initiate see, hear, and become in those inner chambers of night? In the next section, we'll find out together. The first stairway to heaven, Djoser's step pyramid as prototype curriculum. The stone sealed, darkness closed in. But above the buried initiate, another kind of path was already waiting in the sunlight. The very first pyramid. Did you know that before Djoser, pharaohs were buried under low, flat mastabas, simple rectangular mounds that hugged the earth? Then, around 4,700 years ago, something radical appeared on the desert at Saqqara. Djoser's step pyramid rose in 6 terraces, one mastaba stacked on top of another, turning a horizontal tomb into a vertical staircase. For the first time, the royal grave reached upward as if the pharaoh's body had become a stone ladder to the sky. This was not just an architectural experiment. It was a new kind of curriculum. Around the step pyramid stretched a huge walled complex, almost a stone city for the dead. Inside were courtyards where processions could move like flowing ritual diagrams, long colonnaded halls that guided the senses, and a series of dummy chapels, buildings with doors that never opened, shrines that led nowhere. To a tourist, they look decorative. To a mystery school, they look like stations in a training course. Imagine a royal initiate walking that circuit, each courtyard a chapter, each false door a test, each silent chapel a reminder that in the afterlife, appearances deceive, and only true knowledge opens the gates. According to the stories, priests led the living king through these spaces in ceremonial journeys, rehearsing the path he would one day walk alone. The entire complex behaves like a textbook written in limestone, where movement replaces ink. Old legends tell a different story from the idea of a simple grave. Early pyramid texts, carved slightly later but echoing older beliefs, speak of the king climbing to the heavens on a ladder, mounting a stairway to join the imperishable stars that never set. The pharaoh rides on the smoke of incense, on the rays of the sun, on the very steps of the sky. When we look at Joseph's monument with those lines in mind, the meaning sharpens. The stepped form is not just a shape, it is a diagram of ascent. Most importantly, each stone tier can be read as a level of being. The lowest layers cling to the earth, to food, breath, and survival. The middle terraces hint at memory, identity, and royal power. The highest steps point toward the realm of the Ak, the radiant, perfected spirit. What if every step marked a stage of consciousness, an outer rehearsal of an inner climb that later mystery schools would move entirely into hidden chambers and the human mind? For thousands of years, this open staircase announced the royal journey in plain sight. But the Egyptians were not finished. They began to smooth the steps, fold the ladder inward, and bury the path inside solid stone. If Joseph's pyramid is a visible stairway to heaven, what happens when the staircase disappears? Yet the journey continues, bent, read, and refined. Sneferu's experiments as a visible syllabus. Yet the journey continues to see how we have to follow a new kind of king. Sneferu, the architect pharaoh, who according to the stories ordered not one, but at least 3 great pyramids in his lifetime. Did you know he may have moved the royal project from a single monument to a whole series of experiments, each with its own shape, angle, and secret inner chambers? At Dashur, his first bold attempt rises from the desert with a profile that almost looks uncertain. The bent pyramid begins at a steep angle, then suddenly changes halfway up, folding inward as if the stone itself had second thoughts. Engineers explain this as a structural correction. The early angle was too ambitious, the weight too dangerous, so the builders eased the slope to save the monument. But what really happened when a king turned his own pyramid into a visible correction carved in limestone? Imagine being an initiate approaching that strange form, a mountain that starts as a sharp spear into the sky, then softens, bending toward balance. To the priests of a mystery school, that shift could have signaled more than engineering. It could mark a course correction in the understanding of ascent itself. Rush upward too fast, and the structure, of stone or of consciousness, becomes unstable. Slow the climb, widen the base, and the journey through the afterlife gates becomes survivable. Inside, the bent pyramid's dual chambers sit at different heights, connected by passages that feel like a physical diagram of transition. One chamber low and heavy, closer to the earth. Another higher, lighter, pulled toward the outer shell. It is as if the pyramid is teaching a lesson about moving from one state of being to another, about holding two worlds at once without collapsing either. Then Sneferu tries again, just a short walk away. Another giant rises, the Red Pyramid. This time the angle is gentler, consistent, almost serene. No visible change of mind, no kink in the profile. The internal layout is more refined too. 3 corbelled chambers aligned along a clear axis, their soaring ceilings stepping upward like an invisible stair. Here the doctrine feels settled. If the bent pyramid dramatizes transition and balance, the Red Pyramid whispers of perfected ascent. The path is smoother, the geometry calmer, as though the architects had distilled a more mature knowledge of how to guide the soul upward. For thousands of years, these two monuments have stood side by side, broadcasting a progression in stone, from risky experiment to balanced correction to confident, stable climb. So what if each of Sneferu's major pyramids was not just a tomb, but a different chapter in a 3-part syllabus? One monument emphasizing transition, another emphasizing balance, a third often identified with his earlier maiden pyramid, showing the danger of collapse when the teaching is incomplete. Old legends tell a different story than simple royal vanity. A king presiding over a living curriculum of ascent. But these are the trial runs, the prototypes. If this is how the Egyptians practiced getting the ladder right, what happens when they finally perfect it on the Giza plateau? And most importantly, what kind of initiation would demand that level of flawless cosmic precision? We'll find out together. Akhet Khufu, the Great Pyramid, as a horizon, not a grave. When the Egyptians finally perfect the ladder on the Giza plateau, they give it a name that breaks the tomb story in a single stroke. The Great Pyramid was not called a grave. It was called Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu. Did you know the word Akhet does not mean a pile of stones at all, but the glowing band where sky and earth fuse at sunrise and sunset? For thousands of years, Egyptian artists drew the Akhet as a sun disk cradled between 2 peaks. It is a threshold image, a picture of a gate. This is the zone where the sun dies into the west and is reborn in the east, the exact line where the duat touches the living world. So when the priests name this pyramid Horizon of Khufu, they are not just labeling real estate, they are declaring it a portal between worlds. That portal is anchored with almost impossible precision. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an error of only a few arc minutes. Its sides lock onto the cardinal directions so tightly that modern engineers still argue about how the priests measured it. Why such obsession? If this was only a royal monument, slight mistakes would not matter. But if Akhet Khufu is a horizon machine, then it must plug into the cosmic grid exactly, like a key sliding into a lock. Step inside, and the illusion of a simple tomb collapses. A narrow descending passage dives straight into the bedrock, leading us down into a low, rough-hewn subterranean chamber. No decoration, no sarcophagus, just raw stone and darkness. It feels less like a burial room and more like a ritual grave, a place where an initiate confronts the fear of the underworld. Then, suddenly, the pattern interrupts. Halfway down, a tight ascending passage branches upward, as if the stone itself has changed its mind. We move from descent to climb, from compression to effort. Above, the grand gallery opens a steep, soaring corridor of corbelled stone, echoing with every breath. This is not practical architecture. This is theatre, a built journey. At the top, the path forks into two chambers. The so-called Queen's Chamber sits at the heart of the pyramid, calm and enclosed, with mysterious air shafts that do not reach the outside. Some researchers suggest these align with specific stars tied to the duat, turning the chamber into a quiet star map, where the soul learns its route. Higher still, the king's chamber waits, a granite box inside a granite room, tuned like an instrument. According to the stories, its shafts once pointed toward Orion and other imperishable stars, the very destinations of the transformed Ach. Imagine lying in that stone vessel during a midnight ritual, priests chanting in the dark, the chamber humming with resonance. The pyramid around you becomes a three-dimensional sky, a hidden curriculum in stone. So what really happened inside Akhet Khufu? Was this the final exam of the mystery schools, where pharaohs rehearsed death and rebirth inside a living horizon? And if this pyramid is a horizon gate, what other gates might be hiding in the desert, still waiting for a consciousness brave enough to turn the key? Ancient voices, the pyramid texts, and the making of a luminous being. To answer that, we have to step out of the stone itself and into the words carved inside it. Did you know that the oldest great religious text on earth is not a scroll, but a set of inscriptions hidden in the inner chambers of pyramids? In the pyramid of Unas at Saqqara, and in a few that followed, the walls are covered from floor to ceiling with a strange, urgent script. These are the pyramid texts. For thousands of years they were sealed in darkness, a secret library no ordinary person ever saw. When we read them today, something surprising appears. The texts almost never talk about corridors or blocks or ramps. They are not interested in how to build a pyramid. They are obsessed with one thing: how a dead king becomes something more than human. In spell after spell, Unas is not described as a corpse in a box. He is called an Ak. That word means a luminous, effective being, a presence that shines and can act among the gods. The texts speak of him rising to the circumpolar stars that never set, sailing with Ra in the solar bark, joining Osiris in the duat. The stone shell outside is silent. The language on the inside is explosive. Most importantly, the pyramid texts never once call the building around them a pyramid. There is no proud label like Great Tomb or House of Unas. Instead, the focus is entirely on the journey of consciousness. Old legends tell a different story about these kings, and here, on the walls, we see it in their own words. The goal is transformation, not storage. Listen to how these passages work. They are arranged as utterances, spells, invocations, and precise ritual instructions. Stand here, say this name, face this direction, merge with this star. It reads less like funeral poetry and more like a technical manual for navigating non-ordinary states of awareness. This is not just mourning, it is engineering the afterlife. Later, something dramatic happens. The same kind of knowledge appears again, but now written inside wooden coffins, as the coffin texts, and later on, papyrus, as the Book of the Dead. The royal script has been edited, expanded, and placed within reach of wealthy officials, priests, and finally ordinary believers who can afford a scroll. What began as a royal initiation seems to be leaking outward, gradually democratized. So what does that imply about the pyramids themselves? If these words are the written code, where was the living practice? Many researchers now suspect that the pyramid texts were only one layer of a much larger training. Imagine priests whispering these utterances in total darkness, guiding a pharaoh through controlled trance, breath, and sound inside the very chambers where the spells are carved. The walls become both textbook and interface. But what really happened in those rituals? Were these halls classrooms of a hidden school where a human being learned to become an Ak on command? In the next section, we'll follow that trail into the later mystery schools, where this ancient script is reborn in new temples and new rites of awakening. Lasers, muons, and hidden chambers. Modern science meets ancient initiation. To answer that, we have to leave the incense and torches behind and step into a different kind of temple, one made of lasers, cosmic particles, and scanning machines. Did you know that in 2015, a project called Scan Pyramids began quietly bombarding the Great Pyramid with particles from space? Using a technique called muon tomography, teams from Cairo, France, and Japan turned the pyramid into a kind of film camera, letting high-energy muons pass through the stone and reveal where the density changed. In 2017, they announced something no one expected: a hidden space the size of a jetliner, right above the Grand Gallery. They called it the Big Void. No one has entered it. No passage leads in, at least none we can see. Yet the muons do not lie. For thousands of years, people walked around that monument, believing its interior was fully mapped. Suddenly, the pyramid felt alive again, as if it still held secrets it refused to give up. To feel what that means, imagine moving through the spaces we do know. You crouch into the narrow, ascending passage, a tight, sloping tunnel where the ceiling presses close and the air grows heavy. Your body is forced into a bow, as if the architecture itself demands humility. Then the tunnel explodes into the steep Grand Gallery, 7 stories high, with corbelled walls that seem to climb like a stone ladder toward the stars. At the top, the mood changes. The granite blocks of a king's chamber close in, smooth and dark, humming with a strange resonance. A single human voice can set the room vibrating at particular tones, turning the chamber into an instrument. Side niches, low crawl spaces, and those mysterious shafts pointing toward the circumpolar stars add to the feeling that this is not random design. It feels like a ritual labyrinth, a guided journey through compression, ascent, and finally, stillness. But what really happened in those hidden volumes we have not yet touched? The Scan Pyramids data also revealed a smaller corridor behind the north face, just above the original entrance, announced in 2023. Why build a passage, then seal it from human eyes? Why place a massive void directly over the Grand Gallery, the very spine of the inner ascent? According to the stories, initiates faced symbolic death and rebirth. Imagine some of these voids not as engineering leftovers, but as deliberately concealed chambers for staged experiences. total darkness for sensory deprivation, echoing stone for sound rituals, narrow cells where an initiate lay as if entombed, rehearsing the journey to the afterlife while still breathing. What kind of knowledge needs a hidden room above your head, waiting in the dark? Most importantly, if muons and endoscopes are only now detecting these spaces, how many more secret chambers and corridors still sleep inside the stone? And if the Great Pyramid hides an invisible curriculum, what might be waiting inside the lesser-known pyramids and in the half-translated texts still locked in archives? In the next section, we'll find out together just how far this mystery school may have spread and who else might have walked its gates. Why hide a school in stone? The logic of secrecy and the soul. So we end up with a deeper riddle. If the pyramids really hide an invisible curriculum, why bury it under millions of tons of stone? Why not just write a manual and leave it in a library? What kind of knowledge forces a civilization to think in granite? For thousands of years, people have asked what the pyramids were for. Tombs, power symbols, star calendars? But old legends tell a different story. They hint that the real question is not what were they used for, but why go to such extremes to hide and ritualize this knowledge at all? What were the pharaohs and priests so afraid of and so desperate to protect? Imagine teachings that claim to map the soul's journey after death, not as poetry, but as procedure. According to the stories, the Duat was a place of gates, guardians, and tests, where a single wrong word could trap a soul in darkness. If living initiates could rehearse that path, learn those names, and master those gates while still breathing, then whoever controlled that training controlled the most powerful thing of all, the passage between worlds. Did you know some later Egyptian texts quietly warn that certain spells should never be spoken by the uninitiated? Knowledge of the afterlife path was seen as dangerous in the wrong hands, dangerous enough to enslave the dead, to influence the dreams and fears of the living, or to unhinge unprepared minds from ordinary reality. Imagine someone using the secrets of the Duat not to guide, but to bind. Suddenly, the secrecy makes a different kind of sense. But what really happened inside these hidden chambers? What did they learn in there that was worth this level of protection? Most importantly, why carve a school for the soul into stone instead of ink and papyrus? Stone is its own kind of encryption. Papyrus burns, paint fades. Scrolls can be stolen, copied, twisted, but a pyramid is unburnable, unscrollable, and unreadable without the right experiential key. The corridors, angles, and resonant chambers form a code that only activates when a living body walks, breathes, chants, and lies still in the right place. Architecture becomes a lock that only ritual can open. Think of it as a textbook that refuses to speak unless the student is ready. The descending passage forces a symbolic death. The silent darkness strips away ordinary identity. The star-aligned shafts and echoing rooms respond only to specific tones and phrases. Without the rituals, it is just stone. With them, it becomes a living diagram of the cosmos. So we circle back to the question, what did they learn in there? The answer, the Egyptians would say, is nothing less than a different definition of death a different idea of who we are, and a different structure of reality itself. To them, the afterlife was not an abstract hope. It was a mapped territory. In the next section, we'll walk into that map. We'll enter the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and see why its terrifying, beautiful landscape made such extreme secrecy feel not only justified, but absolutely necessary. The Duat, Egypt's otherworld, as a structured, navigable realm. So what did that map actually look like? If the Egyptians treated the afterlife as a territory, what kind of landscape were they expecting to enter the moment their heart stopped? For thousands of years, we have used the word afterlife like a vague, glowing cloud. But old legends tell a different story. For the Egyptians, death meant stepping into the Duat, a vast, structured underworld as real and law-bound as the Nile, only hidden from ordinary sight. It was not a dream. It was a system. They imagined the Duat with shocking detail. Imagined rivers of darkness flowing beneath a sky that looks like polished obsidian. Fields of reeds stretching to the horizon where the dead can farm, rest, and remember. Caverns of fire where serpents coil around burning lakes. Iron gates taller than temples and narrow corridors filled with stars where the solar bark of Ra sails each night, dragging daylight through the body of the sky goddess. Did you know this realm was divided like a cosmic clock? The Duat was often described in 12 great sections, or hours of the night. Each hour had its own terrain, its own guardians, its own rules. One gate might be watched by cobra-headed sentinels, another by a goddess who demands a name, a symbol, a precise spell. Miss a word, fail a test, and the journey ends there. According to the stories, every hour was a trial. The soul had to pass lakes of knives, islands of blazing sand, and shadowy beings who could cut a person off from the light forever. It was not enough to be brave. One had to be trained. One had to know the map. Inside this labyrinth, the human being was not a single simple soul. Egyptian priests described at least 3 main aspects. The Ka was the life force double, the invisible twin that needed food, offerings, and a stable resting place. The Ba was the mobile soul, often shown as a bird with a human head, free to leave the tomb to travel between worlds. And beyond both was the Akh, the fully realized, luminous being, the effective one, who had mastered the Duat and could live among the stars. Most importantly, the journey through the Duat was about stabilizing and unifying these parts. If the car lost its anchor, if the bar could not find its body, if the Akh failed to ignite, the person's existence fractured. This was the true horror, not simple death, but disintegration. In this worldview, ignorance was lethal. A soul that did not know the names of the gates, the faces of the gods, the passwords and protective spells, risked annihilation or endless wandering. That is why pyramids and temples began to function as mystery schools. They were not just monuments to the dead. They were rehearsal chambers. But what really happened inside those stone classrooms of the soul? How did pharaohs and priests practice walking an invisible world? In the next section, we'll enter their training halls and watch how the Duat became a curriculum, maps of the night, texts, stars, and the 12 gates of the underworld. To understand those classrooms of the soul, we have to zoom out from stone to stars, Did you know the Egyptians left entire manuals for the night? Texts like the Amduat and the Book of Gates describe the sun god Ra sailing through the Duat, passing through 12 regions in 12 hours of darkness. Each hour has its own landscape, its own guardian, its own trials and transformations. Miss a gate, forget a name, fail a challenge, and the journey stops. This underworld was not a vague dream, it was mapped. We read of rivers of fire, coiled serpents, caverns filled with the cries of the unprepared. Most importantly, we read of doors, gate after gate, each with a guardian who demands a precise title, a secret name, a ritual phrase. According to the stories, power in the afterlife was not about strength, it was about knowledge. Now look at the pyramids again, especially the great complexes at Giza. Long, tight passages drop steeply into the earth, then suddenly shift direction, rise in elevation, or open into hidden chambers. There is a sequence, a progression, a feeling of moving through levels. Old legends tell a different story than just a tomb, that each change in height, each doorway, each cramped tunnel mirrored one of those 12 regions of the Duat. Imagine walking that path in darkness, the descending passage as the first plunge into the underworld, the low, oppressive corridor as the dangerous middle hours, the sudden opening into the king's chamber as arrival in the radiant heart of the night, where the sun is reborn. Over our heads, the sky was another map. The shafts in the Great Pyramid point not randomly, but toward Orion's belt, towards Sirius, and toward the circumpolar, imperishable stars. For thousands of years, Orion was linked to Osiris, Lord of the Dead, while Sirius was tied to Isis and the flooding Nile. Some researchers see the 3 Giza pyramids as a ground plan of Orion's belt itself, a stone reflection of the Duat's starry corridors. If the Duat is a cosmic river, then Orion and these circumpolar stars were its guiding lights. The soul of the pharaoh was meant to launch from the pyramid, follow those alignments, and join the undying stars. The architecture and the heavens form a single hidden curriculum. But how did initiates actually train for this? The texts are full of dialogue, gatekeepers demanding, "Name me," the dead answering with long lists of titles and secret formulas. In a mystery school, priests could have taken the roles of underworld beings, calling out questions in the dark while the initiate answered from memory. Each correct response opened a literal door deeper into the pyramid, just as the right name opened a gate in the Duat. So we have 12 hours, 12 regions, countless guardians, and a star map etched into the sky in stone. That raises a powerful question. If the route is this detailed, why wait until death to learn it? What kind of training would it be to walk those passages while still alive, using the pyramid itself as a controlled model of the underworld? In the next part, we'll step into those rehearsals and watch how pharaohs used breath, darkness, and sound to die on purpose and come back changed, rehearsing death while breathing. Pharaohs, priests, and living initiates. So here is the twist almost no textbook mentions. These pyramids were not waiting passively for dead kings. They were used by the living as training grounds. Did you know some scholars now describe them as machines for making gods, not just stone coffins? According to the stories, pharaohs and their chosen companions went inside to rehearse death while still breathing. Imagine a royal night in the Old Kingdom. Torches are extinguished one by one. A small group moves toward the pyramid's entrance. The pharaoh, high priests, and a handful of initiates. Most people will never see these inner chambers. This is a secret school, and the lesson is the afterlife itself. What kind of knowledge demands you practice dying before you actually die? The rituals begin with a descent. Blindfolded or guided only by a single dim flame, the initiate is led down the sloping passage that drops into the bedrock. Each step is a step away from the world of sunlight. The air cools, the ceiling lowers, the sounds of the desert fade. In their imagination, they are no longer in Giza or Saqqara. They are entering the Duat, the hidden realm beneath the horizon. But what really happened in those narrow corridors? Old legends tell a different story than simple burial. Priests whispered the names of underworld gates, reciting lines from the pyramid texts carved in nearby tombs. These were not just poems, they were passwords. For thousands of years, Egyptians believed a soul could only pass dangerous guardians if it spoke the correct spell, the correct name, the correct declaration of purity. So initiates did not just read these texts, they memorized them until the words lived in their bones. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, later called the Book of the Dead, became a mental map. Each spell was a landmark, each god a point of orientation in a vast inner landscape. Most importantly, the rehearsal happened in altered states, where the boundary between imagination and vision began to blur. Picture an initiate finally reaching the king's chamber. They lie down in the stone sarcophagus, the lid slid into place, or the lights completely extinguished. Total darkness, total silence, until the chanting begins. Deep voices of priests rise and fall, vibrating through the granite walls. The king's chamber is famous for its resonance. Certain tones seem to hang in the air. The sound travels through stone, through the body, through the skull. Now the pattern interrupts. Is this a tomb or a laboratory of consciousness? Some researchers suggest that in such conditions, sensory deprivation, rhythmic sound, slow breathing, the brain can slip into powerful trance states. There are hints, though indirect, that plant preparations or incense may have been used to deepen the experience. Imagine feeling your body heavy as rock, yet your awareness lifting, as if your car and bar are practicing separation. In that rehearsal, death is staged, but the lesson is real. Face fear, cross inner gates, return with memory, and when the final physical death comes, the path will not be strange. But were these rehearsals only for kings, or for a wider circle of initiates hidden in Egypt's temples and underground halls? In the next part, we'll follow that trail into the broader mystery schools that claimed to turn ordinary humans into living stars. The labyrinth within. Encounter, response, reward. As a spiritual technology. If the duat was a dangerous landscape, then its map followed a very specific pattern. Encounter, response, reward. Did you know that across Egypt's funerary texts, the same rhythm repeats over and over, like a hidden code running beneath the entire afterlife system? A soul approaches a gate, a lake of fire, or a towering being with the head of a lion. The guardian demands, "Who are you? What is my name? What words of power do you carry?" The soul must respond with exact phrases, secret titles, and carefully memorized spells. Speak correctly, and the gate swings open, granting safe passage, protection, or a new power. Speak wrongly, and the path collapses into darkness. This was not vague poetry. It was a stepwise technology, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, the Amduat, the Book of Gates, all echoed the same structure: staged encounters, precise verbal keys, and incremental upgrades of the soul. Each successful exchange gives the traveler new sight, new allies, or the ability to pass unharmed through fire, water, or serpents in the night. Now imagine the pyramid as the physical game board for this pattern. Each chamber, each bend in the passage becomes a checkpoint in a living ritual. According to the stories, priests in white linen could have taken the role of guardians, blocking a doorway in the half-dark, demanding the initiate speak the right spell, the right god name, the right description of the gate itself. Picture an initiate standing at the entrance of a narrow corridor, heart racing in the stale air. A priest guardian steps forward, voice echoing against the stone. Name the gate. Name the star to which this passage leads. The initiate must answer with words tied to Orion, to Sirius, to the hidden duat beneath the sky. Only then is the way ahead allowed to unlock. Most importantly, the Egyptians were obsessed with precision. Correct words, correct intonation, correct posture. They treated rituals as if they were operating a complex machine. One mispronounced name, one gesture out of place, and the whole mechanism could jam. In the king's chamber, a single tone sung wrongly might fail to awaken the resonance of the granite. In a funerary spell, one missing line could leave the soul stranded before a silent gate. Old legends tell a different story than simple tombs. They hint at a curriculum built around a spine of 12 great gates or stages. The duat was divided into 12 hours of the night, each with its own guardians, landscapes, and passwords. In the same way, a sequence of architectural thresholds, descending passage, ascending passage, Queen's Chamber, Grand Gallery, King's Chamber, may have served as a stone mnemonic for an invisible ladder of 12 initiatory tests. What kind of knowledge was encoded here? For thousands of years, priests copied parts of these gate texts onto coffins, tomb walls, and papyri. But what really happened in the original schools, inside the pyramids themselves, we'll find out together, because there are hints that even the texts we know, the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, are only fragments of a longer, more complex journey. Some gates are described, but never fully explained. Certain guardians appear once and vanish. It is as if entire levels of the game have been erased. So the question becomes unsettling. Were there lost gates and forgotten stages of mastery, once walked in darkness beneath millions of tons of stone? And if the visible pyramids are only the outer shell of this spiritual technology, where might the rest of the labyrinth still be hiding? Echoes across cultures, mystery traditions, and the pyramid legacy. If parts of the labyrinth are missing in Egypt, maybe they did not disappear at all. Maybe they moved. What if the pyramid initiations did not end with stone, but continued in other lands, under other names, in other mystery schools? For thousands of years, travelers spoke of strange rituals in Greece, far from the Nile. At Eleusis, initiates entered dark halls, fasted, drank a secret potion, and faced a dramatized descent into the underworld. They emerged at dawn, claiming they no longer feared death. Does that sound familiar? A controlled plunge into darkness, a symbolic death, a return carrying new sight. Old legends tell a different story about the Orphic circles as well. According to the stories, some initiates were buried in trance-like states, given tiny gold tablets engraved with instructions for the afterlife. The tablets whisper lines like, "I am a child of earth and starry heaven." It echoes the pyramid texts, where pharaohs proclaim themselves sons of the sky goddess, sailing with Ra among the imperishable stars. Different language, the same promise of a transformed, starbound self. Did you know that several ancient writers openly linked these Greek mysteries back to Egypt? Herodotus hints that certain rituals of Demeter were borrowed from Egypt. Plutarch describes Isis and Osiris using concepts that sound suspiciously like Greek philosophy wrapped in Nile imagery. Iamblichus speaks of priests and philosophers traveling to Egyptian temples to learn sacred mathematics, cosmology, and the techniques of the soul. What kind of knowledge was so important that thinkers crossed seas just to sit in those hidden chambers? When we compare them, a pattern starts to crystallize. Secret teachings guarded by oaths, carefully staged ordeals in darkness, symbolic deaths being blindfolded, entombed, or led through underground passages. Then, at the end, a revelation, a light, a vision, a voice, and the promise of a different quality of consciousness on the other side. Most importantly, these were not stories to believe. They were journeys to be walked. Here is the pattern interrupt. Maybe the Egyptian pyramids are not an isolated marvel at all. Maybe they are the earliest, monumental version of a training system that later goes underground. In Egypt's Old Kingdom, the textbook is a mountain of stone aligned to Orion in the pole. Later, the textbook becomes a temple hall, a Greek telesterion, a dim lodge room, or even a purely symbolic architecture built in the imagination. The outer forms change: pyramid, temple, cave, academy. But the inner blueprint stays strangely familiar. A candidate is separated from ordinary life, led through gates, tested by fear, sound, and silence, then reborn as someone who has rehearsed death and touched, even briefly, the realm beyond. So perhaps every pyramid is one chapter in a much larger manual, humanity's attempt to build machines for making gods, not just in Egypt, but in scattered schools across time. And if these schools still echo through later traditions, what traces of the old pyramid science might still be hiding in plain sight around us today? We'll find out together in the next layer of this mystery. Walking into a pyramid today, how to read the hidden curriculum. So, if every pyramid is a chapter in a hidden manual, how do we actually read it when we walk inside? What if the next time we stand before one of these giants, we treat it not as a ruin, but as a living page from an invisible school? Here's the first shift. When we approach a pyramid, we don't just ask, who's buried here? We ask, what stage of the journey does this outer form represent? A stepped pyramid like Djoser's feels like a raw stairway, a visible ladder of ascent. A smooth pyramid like Khufu's becomes a single, unbroken slope, a disciplined climb toward a point of light. Others suggest a frozen horizon line or a stone star map pinned to the desert. Did you know that for thousands of years, people have whispered that Giza mirrors Orion's belt and the Duat in the sky? Then we cross the threshold. The passages and chambers become sentences in a silent text. A long descending corridor into the bedrock is not just architecture. It is a symbolic death, a choice to leave daylight consciousness. The air cools, the light fades, and our senses narrow. Low ceilings force the body to bow and the ego to compress. According to the stories, initiates crawled through such tunnels as part of rituals of surrender, learning what it feels like when the old self has no room left. Suddenly, the space opens. A burial chamber, the queen's chamber, the king's chamber. These expansions are not accidents. They feel like breakthroughs into new states of awareness, where pressure turns into stillness and echoing resonance. Some chambers, carved in granite with strange acoustic properties, respond to a single human voice with a rolling, vibrating hum. What if every expansion is a rehearsal for emerging into the afterlife, into the vast halls of the Duat beyond the gates? Most importantly, we begin to notice alignment. Where does this narrow shaft point? What star did it once frame at midnight? An opening aimed at Orion, Sirius, or the circumpolar stars becomes a stone telescope for the soul. Old legends tell a different story than simple burial, that these were launch tubes for the bar, guiding it towards specific regions of the sky. So we can ask, what hour of the Duat might this correspond to? And what inner gate might it mirror in us? Now the carved words themselves change character. The pyramid texts, the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead stop looking like superstition and start reading like technical manuals. Each spell trains attention. One teaches the mind to remember secret names at a terrifying gate. Another rehearses how to keep the heart light when weighed against Ma'at's feather. Another drills the soul to recognize friendly beings from deceivers in the dark. We may not recite the ancient language, but we can still ask, what kind of knowledge is this text trying to install? Is it training courage under pressure, precision of memory, the ability to hold a clear image while surrounded by chaos? And here is the quiet secret. We do not need formal initiation to begin. Simply walking mindfully through these passages, holding this lens, turns a tourist visit into a personal ritual. Every step down becomes a meditation on impermanence. Every turn upward becomes a commitment to continuity, to coming forth by day, again and again. But what really happened when entire schools of priests spent years inside these spaces, repeating these patterns? How far could this mind training go? In the next part of this mystery, we'll find out together how later traditions may have inherited and disguised this pyramid curriculum in plain sight. The pyramids are still teaching, recap, revelation, and your next step. So where does all of this leave us? What really happened inside these hidden chambers, and what does it have to do with us now? We began with a familiar picture, pyramids as giant tombstones for kings. Most of us grew up believing they were only tombs for pharaohs, but old legends tell a different story. Step by step, we have followed that other story, the one that sees every pyramid as a stone textbook from an invisible university, a mystery school carved in limestone and granite, designed to train the soul for the duat. Did you know that our journey mirrored the path of the pyramids themselves? We started with Djoser's strange rising staircase at Saqqara, a literal stone ladder reaching toward the sky. Then we watched Sneferu experiment at Midam, bend the angles at Dasha, and finally stabilize the Red Pyramid, as if the whole land was a laboratory for a new kind of school. By the time we reached Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, the horizon itself had turned into a curriculum. Inside those chambers, the texts stopped worrying about bodies and started obsessing over one thing, becoming an Ak, a shining, effective spirit. The pyramid texts in Unis's pyramid almost never say pyramid at all. They speak, instead of transformation, of climbing rays of sunlight, of joining a star map that mirrored the duat's 12 gates and guarded passages. This was not just a burial. It was a rehearsal space for a dangerous journey. For thousands of years, priests walked those passages in darkness, reciting names, passwords, and rituals that matched the duat's 12-fold gate-guarded structure. The descending corridors became symbolic deaths. The horizontal corridors became tests. The final chambers became the moment of judgment, where the heart would be weighed against martyr's feather, and the initiate would either fall back into night or rise as an Ak among the imperishable stars. So now we face the question that will not go away. If every pyramid encodes a lesson, what kind of knowledge is each one trying to teach? What is Djoser's stairway really inviting us to climb? What does Sneferu's bent pyramid say about failure, correction, and second chances? What does the Great Pyramid whisper about alignment between earth, body, and sky when the king's chamber hums at just the right frequency? Most importantly, what happens if we begin to listen again, not only as archaeologists, but as potential initiates standing at the first gate? Rewatch this journey with a notebook. Trace the passages, the names, the gates. Look up images of the pyramid texts, the star shafts, the underground chambers. When you visit a museum or see a photo of a temple wall, let this lens come with you. Ask, what curriculum is hidden here? What kind of school am we standing inside? Because this series is only the first initiation. In the next episode, we will follow the initiates as they leave the pyramids behind and descend beneath the temples into literal and symbolic labyrinths of stone. Old legends tell a different story about what waited in those underground halls. Coils of tunnels, echoing chambers, and trials that felt like the duat made real. Were these the next classrooms in Egypt's underworld curriculum? We'll find out together, and somewhere in that darkness, another gate is waiting to open.